Hey, welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at zonecoverage.com. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and today we're talking a little bit more about your 10-2 Minnesota Vikings, talking, what's going to go down here in Carolina this weekend, take a look at some important matchups. Obviously, guys like Cam Newton are going to be very important. Christian McCaffrey, multi-dimensional talent that's going to be a weapon for the offense of, the Panthers. All kinds of weapons on this offense and their defense, so we've got a lot to get through today. So let's jump right into it here, starting with a word from our sponsor. This is Black Stag Brewing once again. With the Vikings victory on the horizon, it's important to talk about victory, success, winning, and beer. That's right, it's time for another beer pong tournament over at Black Stag Brewing. The Jingle Cup is finally here. Come pong next Saturday, December 9th, for a chance to win free beer for a year and $100 in free delivery from Running Tap. The tourney starts at 12. But if you want to limber up, come in at 11 for yoga with Ohm Brewers. That's Ohm Brewers, folks. They bring yoga to breweries, do an absolutely fantastic job. El Burrito Mercado will be there with delicious tacos, and there's always great beer over at Black Stack. But you knew that already. You really can't go wrong here. See you at the Jingle Cup next Saturday. Tickets available at beerpong.twincities.directory. That's www.beerpong.twincities.directory. All right, let's jump right into some Vikings football stuff here. Starting with Cam Newton, I think he's probably the biggest threat that the Vikings are going to face this weekend. He can do so many things. A tremendous athlete, big body, cannon for an arm. People have doubted his accuracy, I suppose. His launch angle, that kind of stuff are things that people have, I guess, dismissed for him. But what do you think about Cam Newton? Has he returned to the former MVP form that we saw? Is he a dangerous player, or is he the up and down guy that, we've been complaining about on our fantasy teams all year?
I mean, yeah, he's very up and down. I think the stat that kind of jumps out at me is, I think in all but one or two games this year, his passer rating has either been over 100 or under 60. So it's basically very hit or miss with Cam Newton this season. And I think, because with this Panthers offense, a lot of it is some Eric Reidell stuff. A lot of deeper routes down the field, kind of, a 5 to 7 step drop, kind of the stuff that we saw a little bit of with the Vikings when Norv Turner was in town. And Cam Newton has, over the years, progressed obviously as a pocket passer and been able to make some of those throws with that cannon of an arm. But I think the protection he's getting this season is not quite, what it has been in the past. I don't want to say that person's name yet. We'll get to that later, I'm sure. But that's, I think, part of the reason he's had, very inconsistent play this year. The numbers, they kind of show it. If you look at, net yards per attempt, under 6, adjusted net yards per attempt, 5.48, and then the touchdown interception ratio, which again we don't really like to use, but 16 to 11. So it is very up and down for Cam Newton, and I think a lot of their wins this season have come in games where he has played poorly, and they've kind of escaped with wins, which is why I'm not as high on this Carolina team as maybe some are. Yeah,
I feel like there's a lot of people that take away from what Cam Newton tries to do. Part of that is because, in my opinion, it's he's such a star. He's so happy all the time. It's very easy to take down a person like him because it seems like he, very rarely gets rattled. And when he does, he gets completely exposed. You think about what happened in the playoffs last year with the whole post-game interview thing with the media and how that, blew up in his face when really it wasn't all that big of a deal at all. You can make an argument that it wasn't a big deal, in the least bit. But Cam Newton is, for everything that people say he's not, he probably adds, something that he is. Like I said before, cannon for an arm. He basically is a fullback playing quarterback when he's on the goal line, which is probably the most dangerous element of his game because it's difficult to stop that train,
Sure.
no matter who you are. So that's kind of the one thing that really concerns me here. The Vikings defense has been very solid on the goal line. Obviously, the Vikings offense has been great on the goal line. But if you look at what Cam Newton has been able to do in a couple of years, basically using sneaks and whatnot to get that 1 yard in situational spots, areas where basically he needs to get 1 or 2 yards, and all he essentially needs to do with that big frame is fall forward.
Right.
That's kind of, for me, what makes him dangerous regardless of how he plays. It's just the ability to get 1 or 2 yards when you absolutely need it.
Right, yeah, and I think, his ability to run out of the pocket, I think, is slightly underrated. I think that's still a strength of his game, but I think what the Vikings did really well last year at Carolina in that Week 3 game was, the Vikings had 8 sacks in that game. I think a lot of them were just simply collapsing the pocket. It wasn't, I feel like a lot of those sacks weren't a result of, Cam rolling out and the coverage kind of delaying his ability to throw the ball and then the Vikings getting a sack that way. I think a lot of it was just simply the pocket collapsed and Cam had nowhere to go besides into the arms of a Viking pass rusher. So I think, you have to look for the Vikings defensive line to do something similar this week as far as a game plan to attack Cam Newton. We have seen, at least last year, we saw that quite a bit where mobile quarterbacks kind of got the best of the Vikings. I think specifically of Dak Prescott there. But Cam Newton in the pocket, I think, is where he'll be most uncomfortable given the Vikings' pass rushing prowess and then the fact that I like the Vikings a lot on defense against the receivers that they offer. Even with Greg Olsen returning this week, you look at their receivers. You have Devin Funchess, who still pretty raw in this league. He's still kind of becoming a starting receiver.
Sure.
But I'm assuming Xavier Rhodes could shadow him, just given because the other actual wide receivers that Carolina will throw out there, Kalen Clay and Russell Shepard. I guess those are human beings that exist, but I don't really know who they are. And then obviously you'll see a lot of Christian McCaffrey out there as well, line up in the slot, out of the backfield, whatever it is. But I think, as far as receivers versus defensive backs, I really like the Vikings there. So I really think keeping Cam Newton in the pocket and making him throw to those receivers from the pocket is going to be important.
Absolutely, absolutely. You mentioned those wide receivers. This is a team, by the way, that traded Kelvin Benjamin earlier this year.
Yeah.
You have to wonder kind of what went down there, right? As, for looking at this depth chart at wide receiver, like you just said, Funchess is on top of it now. An early round pick out of Michigan. There's plenty of talent there. But Kalen Clay and Russell Shepard and Brenton Burson is another one that's on that team.
Curtis Samuel has been hurt. Otherwise, he would have been really a nice piece to have with that offense too.
Absolutely. But basically, the number one receiver here is actually supposed to be a running back. That's Christian McCaffrey out of Stanford University. You love McCaffrey. We have always, talked about how great of a player McCaffrey likely is. And now he's proving it, in his first season. And he's proving it in a way that a lot of the other, rookies haven't, right? You think about how, what Kareem Hunt has been able to do. Impressive stuff for sure, but a little bit inconsistent. You think about what Dalvin Cook obviously was able to do before he went down with an injury. Phenomenal player, obviously, but you take a look at what McCaffrey has been able to do as a rookie here, and I think he really has a solid shot at Offensive Rookie of the Year, simply because he's playing receiver and running back. He's literally playing both because he's lining up in the slot, he's lining up in the outside, he's taking rush attempts, and I can't remember specifically, but he's right up there in the tops with other rookies in terms of total receptions. So,
right.
What do you think about McCaffrey? What's the most dangerous element of his game, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's his route running. And I said even back, I think in March, April, that he's the best wide receiver in this draft class. And, he obviously came out as a running back, and he's listed as a running back. And he's playing in the backfield a lot of times with Jonathan Stewart back there as well. But I think his route running is, what's mostly devastating about his game. I compared a lot to Theo Riddick in Detroit out of the backfield and in the slot where, the Lions run a lot of quick stuff for Theo Riddick, and I think the Panthers are still kind of incorporating that with McCaffrey, right. But I think his future in the NFL is going to be a lot like Theo Riddick, but probably better. I just think his skill set overall is better. His route running is more pure. I think he's faster and quicker than Theo Riddick. So I think that, that skill set is still kind of emerging itself on the surface here in the NFL. So Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr, I assume, will be tasked with keeping him in check all game. And I assume, because all year Kendricks and Barr have been, phenomenal at keeping things in front of them in the flat. Allowing a 3-yard catch, for example, in the flat, but only letting those 3 yards happen and not turning it into a 10, 12-yard gain. But that's something Christian McCaffrey has been, very exceptional at this season, is turning a 1-yard reception into something for double digits. So that's what I'm looking forward to, is obviously Christian McCaffrey's route running out of the backfield on angle routes, circle routes, etc. Or it could be, his ability after the catch to make people miss, whether it's, Eric Kendricks or some backup linebacker. I think he really has that ability.
Yeah, Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks will certainly have to be on their P's and Q's this weekend. It'll be important, obviously, to stop a guy like Christian McCaffrey. You need athleticism regardless of who you got matched up on him, because this is a guy that can cut lightning fast. That was the number one thing that I noticed from his film at Stanford when we were back in April when we were reviewing prospects, was just how quick his feet were. I mean, he's incredibly athletic, and he makes quick cuts, catches the ball in stride. He's just an extremely dangerous player all the way around. So, you look at what he's been able to accomplish so far as a rookie, considering the fact that, like you said, Cam Newton has been a little bit up and down this year. I mean, he's been relatively consistent. So, you think about the pieces that this team does have in Carolina on offense. Cam Newton and Christian McCaffrey. You also have Jonathan Stewart as well, who has been kind of undervalued and underappreciated, I think largely because of things like fantasy football, because he doesn't get a ton of touches and he doesn't do a ton with them, but he's also been a player that has been effective in situational football, that kind of stuff. So, there are a lot of tools on this offense. It's just a matter of how they're going to use them this weekend now. So you look at what Cam Newton can do, you look at what McCaffrey can do, you look at what Funchess does well, and Greg Olsen, obviously, is returning, tight end, absolute stud. Those weapons may not sound elite on paper, but if you manipulate them the right way, I think that this can absolutely be a very dangerous offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think you saw some of that in 2015. Obviously the weapons were a little bit different, but that's what this offense is supposed to be. Right. It's the Cam Newton MVP season, I think, is kind of the peak of what this offense was. So it's not like they're not dangerous and they can't put up points. I just think the offensive line is regressed a little bit, but I think to losing Kelvin Benjamin, losing Greg Olsen for an extended period of time, and then now you have again these receivers that they're running out there: Russell Shepard, Kalen Clay, Curtis Samuel, a lot of these guys I've never heard of before. I think their running game, for the most part, when it's not Cam Newton or not some option play, it's not very effective. Jonathan Stewart's at 3.2 yards per attempt this year. Christian McCaffrey 3.5. Obviously, when they incorporate Cam Newton into there with some option and misdirection stuff, the Vikings have to stay disciplined there. But Cam Newton is averaging just under 6 yards a carry this year. So he, apparently has that kind of missing piece in the running game. So I would assume the Panthers would like to establish a run against a really, really good run defense. So expect some read option stuff there to, for sure. Either obviously for him to create his own opportunities, or maybe it's to create misdirection, get McCaffrey and Jonathan Stewart into space, because that running game has been not very effective, and that's part of the reason again why this offense has been inconsistent. Absolutely. So it would be very difficult for me personally to get away from this offense here without talking about the offensive line. Let's just go there. We have to. Let's go there. Let's go there. Matt Khalil is the left tackle of the Carolina Panthers. Excuse me. You guys know Matt Khalil, right? Pretty solid player. Obviously comes out of USC, absolute stud. It seemed like he was a can't-miss prospect when he joined the Vikings. Now, through some ups and downs, let's call it, he's no longer with the Vikings, and he's in Carolina, and that's why Vikings didn't demand excellence, so he left.
Right, right. So he's in Carolina now. He is their left tackle, which, allowed for the Vikings to go out and get Riley Reif and then insert him there. Obviously one of the bigger pieces of this team this season. So, Matt Khalil versus Everson Griffin. That's the matchup that I think everyone wants to see this weekend from a Vikings fan standpoint.
I really want to see it.
Absolutely. I mean, think about how much fun that has to be for Everson Griffin. Simply because he's been going against this guy in practice for years. He knows him well. It used to be like a fun-loving thing, like I'm going to try to beat you so you get better. Now he gets to beat him and, really beat him, crush his spirits. He has that opportunity for the first time. It's going to mean
something.
Exactly. It's definitely going to mean something. So if you're Everson Griffin and you look at kind of the way that this game, how important this game is, the way that they're going to try to get the ball out probably very quickly to guys like Christian McCaffrey. What do you think is, what is to be expected from this Everson Griffen-Matt Khalil matchup?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of pressures and hurries and et cetera from that side, just because of the nature of the matchup. Everson Griffen is clearly one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. If he's not getting sacks, he's definitely affecting the passer.
Right.
That's not a secret. Matt Khalil, he has been playing better as of late. I will give him that. He does look better in the last few weeks here. I have to give him that, but it still is what it is. It's Matt Khalil against Everson Griffen. And last year in the same stadium, Griffen put up 3 sacks. I believe it was actually on Mike Remmers, or maybe it was Michael Orr. I can't remember which lineman was playing on the left side, but either way, Everson Griffen destroyed the Panthers last year. And I would assume, given that he practiced against Matt Khalil for 4 years, that we can expect something similar on this Sunday. So, again, I don't want to bring up the whole revenge thing because I don't like that being a thing, but at the same time, like Matt Khalil's comment about the Vikings coaching staff not demanding excellence, like that has stuck with me since he left, and I don't understand, because Riley Reiff has been plugged in at left tackle for the Vikings, and either the Vikings are suddenly demanding excellence, which
you tend to doubt that.
I can't imagine that's actually a difference here, or Riley Reiff is just way better than Matt Khalil, and the Vikings won the quote-unquote trade there. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with the latter here. I think that's definitely the highlight matchup of the week. Last week we talked a lot about Xavier Rhodes and Julio Jones. That was the one that I was watching all of last week's game. But coming into this matchup now, this is the matchup. This is the one that I'm going to be watching when Carolina is on offense. It's very easy to watch the quarterback exclusively when you're watching the game on TV. But I think that Vikings fans should really try to take notice of what Everson Griffen does to Matt Khalil this week, because, like you said, we're not calling this revenge, so to speak. It is a business. Matt Khalil probably made this decision to go play with his brother Ryan in Carolina. It makes a ton of sense for him. He needed a reboot. But at the same time, if you're the Vikings and he leaves, you can't blame them for being a little bit annoyed, right?
Well, see, I was okay with him leaving, the decision to leave Minnesota to join your brother. I totally understand that.
Right.
That's fine. You do what you got to do, bro. But when you leave and say that your former coaches didn't demand excellence, and there's really no other evidence to back that up, or people are kind of all confused about that. From what I understand from inside the team, we're kind of like, well, that's all right. That rubbed me the wrong way, and I'm on the outside looking in, but I kind of want to see Everson Griffen, drill Matt Khalil a few times on Sunday, and I imagine that I will see it.
Right, I'm with you all the way there. For what it's worth, Matt Khalil does have great pizza.
I was going to mention that.
That's where I'm torn. This is something I talked about on Twitter earlier this week. I'm torn because I absolutely love Pyology. It's fantastic.
How many times did we go there in Mankato this year?
Two or three?
I think 2 or 3.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and then as soon as we got home from Mankato, I went and found a Pyology in Highland Park.
Yeah, good for you. You have another Pyology. Yeah,
exactly. So I appreciate what Matt Khalil brought to the Vikings. Like you said, I don't ever like it when players leave and immediately at least prove it first, right? Remember when Blair Walsh,
the Blair Walsh thing,
during the preseason game, guys, players. I get it. You're competitive. Your blood. You sign somewhere else. You want to get him back, but get him back before. Right. Do something of value first.
Do what Case Keenum did.
Right.
Take home to just drill the Rams, and then I don't even think he talked trash after that, but he definitely had the right to after that.
Absolutely. So Case Keenum's doing it right. Guys like Matt Khalil, when they leave, not so much. So I would expect Everson Griffen to tear him to shreds on Sunday. That's my expectation. I guess we'll wait and see. onto the defensive side of the football now, since basically I feel like the majority of the offensive line is the two Khalil brothers. Those are the two guys that you should probably be keeping an eye on here. On the defensive side of the football, we generally start with the defensive line and kind of work our way back. So let's start with Kawan Short and Star Lotulelei. Both of those guys in the interior do a tremendous job creating pressure and also eating up space. What makes interior pressure so difficult to deal with, especially for a quarterback like Case Keenum, who shows great pocket awareness and, tends to have a good feeling for what's going on his blind side, but with pressure coming up the middle, might be a little bit different this week against Carolina.
Well, see, the nice thing about Case Keenum is that, a lot of quarterbacks can step up in the pocket. Like it comes natural that's something that, that's one of the basic fundamentals of playing quarterback, but it's another thing to sidestep pressure and to do so naturally. And I think Case Keenum is exceptional at moving swiftly from left to right in the pocket while still keeping his eyes downfield, finding open receivers. You saw that multiple times against Atlanta last week.
Also resetting his feet, too. Because obviously when you move laterally,
especially to the left,
it's very easy to cross your feet over, which is something that I've been told from coaches. You obviously never want to cross your feet over because as soon as you cross your legs, you're giving yourself the potential to trip. So it's not as easy as people make it out to be to manipulate the pocket the way that Case Keenum does. Because not only is he, sensing pressure very well from his blind side, but he's been stepping up well, and he's been able to escape it as soon as he senses it for the most part this season. Now, for me, like I just said, this is going to be a difference for me because generally he's been very good at climbing the pocket, stepping up in the pocket. So you look at basically this is going to be a different type of scenario for Case Keenum here. Do you see him having any more difficulty with solid pressure coming up the middle from guys like Kawan Short?
I really don't. Because I think, first of all, Atlanta's defensive line, I think, presents a bigger challenge than Carolina's. No disrespect to Kawan Short and, the 57-year-old Julius Peppers. But that play last week against Atlanta where he, it was basically as if someone was controlling him and just kind of, the left analog stick got stuck and he was rolling out left, rolling out left, rolling out left, rolling out left.
Right.
And there's guys diving at his feet on the ground in front of him and he just is unfazed and he finds Diggs for, I think, 15, 20 yards, after Diggs rerouted himself down the field. So that kind of play there tells me that, I don't think it matters who essentially is rushing the passer to an extent, that just this Vikings offensive line will at least give him the opportunity to get out of the pocket. And I think that's all he really needs to make a play. And that's the difference that at least we were used to Sam Bradford last year, where he stepped back and kind of stayed in one spot and tried to deliver from there, where Keenum is very comfortable moving out of the pocket, making throws. So again, with this Carolina defense, it's not like I don't want to disrespect, what they do, because they have some talent there, but I just think after Atlanta and then after, the way Case Keenum eluded them, I really don't see much of a problem in this matchup.
Absolutely. You did mention Julius Peppers here, which I think warrants he definitely warrants some praise here. This is a guy, like you said, he's about 64 years old, and he's been playing at a high level in this league for a number of years. Started his career in Carolina, became kind of a sack daddy in Carolina, and then he goes to Green Bay for a couple of years.
He has 8.5 sacks this year.
That's what I'm ramping up to.
37 years old, 8.5 sacks.
Yeah, I mean, a guy at 54 years old should not be able to get 8.5 sacks per game. You know what I'm saying? Or, excuse me, not per game, but he should not be getting 8.5 sacks.
Nobody's getting 8.5 sacks per game,
except for maybe Everson Griffin this week. But but my point being here is that you look at what Peppers has been able to accomplish, rushing off of the edge in a 4-3 alignment, and then also being a linebacker, was in Green Bay, and being able to pass rush in that way. This is an extremely talented player that you can move around the formation, use a number of different ways. So I would keep an eye on Julius Peppers because despite his, quote, advanced age, he doesn't appear to be slowing down a whole lot. So moving on to that second level of this Carolina defense here. A lot of players that I really like. This is possibly the most talented 4-3 linebacking group in the NFL, with maybe an exception to Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks. The difference here for me is that Carolina has three studs. You got the veteran Thomas Davis, who has been one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL for a number of years. Then you've got Luke Kuechly up the middle. One of the best pure tacklers that I've seen since I started watching the league. you really pray for this guy that he doesn't get another concussion because of how.
When he's not concussed, he's an elite football player.
He's lethal in coverage, lethal at tackling. He flows sideline to sideline well. He just does everything at a very, very high level. So, and then on top of that too, you got Shaq Thompson on the outside, who's a guy that I loved coming out and thought would be a great fit for the Vikings. When he was coming out of Washington, his coverage skills were apparent. It's very clear now that he is Thomas Davis's replacement when he ultimately retires. So all three of those guys, tons of talent. We know Kuechly, we know Davis. What can you say about Shaq Thompson basically as a coverage linebacker?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to how Carolina employs Shaq Thompson, what his assignment's going to be, and then B, kind of how Pat Shurmur kind of counters it, because I really think Thompson and McKinnon will kind of be, man on man for, several times in this game as McKinnon out of the backfield as a receiver. We saw him last week score on a pick play, what it looked like in the red zone. I do believe, looking at what Carolina does, I feel like Thompson would be the best matchup for Jerick McKinnon. Right. I would expect that to be, you're one-on-one a lot of the time, and then I would assume Thomas Davis will take care of Kyle Rudolph most of the time, and then obviously Kuechly will kind of roam the middle of the field, do what he does against the run as well. So that's kind of what I'm looking for out of this group. But as you said, that's a phenomenal trio right there. Luke Kuechly is obviously one of the best, if not the best, in the middle. And then right. Davis and Thompson both in coverage are exceptional. So I don't expect Keenum to have as much success underneath checking down to guys or looking at your third option after your progression as he has in the past. This trio should do a much better job of kind of covering that up than we've seen in previous weeks.
You mentioned McKinnon here as a candidate, as a guy that Shaq Thompson probably will be on in coverage when he's split out of the backfield or flanked or whatever. However the Vikings decide to use him. Simple question here. Well, not so simple, but I'm going to make it sound simple. Is this a Latavius Murray game or a Jerick McKinnon game?
I think I'm going to go Latavius Murray, and I just think the Vikings have kind of found something on the ground here with him. The last few weeks, he's kind of found a bit of a groove here, and it looks like Jerick McKinnon has slid into that role as a more of the complementary running back, but also then kind of he's gaining that status as the receiver as well. He's lining up more in the slot a little bit, coming out of the backfield on screens. It looks like that's kind of the roles that they've settled into. Murray as the workhorse, McKinnon as the receiver slash, kind of change of pace guy and out of the backfield. So I think Murray's groove right now is going to win me over in that kind of question. But it's not like McKinnon won't have a game plan a role in this game plan. I just think the Carolina linebacking trio will be able to cover him up, I guess, better than they will against Murray on the ground.
Yeah, I actually really agree with you. Just overall, like that complete take, I'm with you completely.
Shocker.
You look at the two levels though, because it's interesting because the dominant interior players on that defensive line suggests that Murray probably makes sense, and then also the linebacking level with so many good coverage players also seems to make sense more for Murray than McKinnon, given that the Vikings have used McKinnon to expose linebackers that aren't as good at coverage. So I'm with you. I think this is definitely a Murray game. Not to say that McKinnon won't have a role, as you said, but I do expect this to be, a game where Murray is going to see the majority of the touches, simply because I think his skill set, the way that the Vikings would employ his skill set, generally speaking, fits better against this matchup. So then we move on to the secondary here, and this is important, obviously, because Josh Norman is now with the Washington Redskins. I personally don't know. Something had to have gone down there. Something weird had to have gone down there where after the franchise tag, they just basically let him walk.
Think about a defense with Luke Kuechly, Thomas Davis, Quan Short, and Josh Norman on the inside, which is what it was in 2015.
Right.
And there's your elite defense paired with an offense that had Cam Newton MVP numbers. 15-1 team right there.
Yeah. So now it's James Bradberry out there. That is, quote, the number one cornerback. I think that Bradberry has been a solid player this year, but with Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, I would expect it's going to be Diggs and Bradberry, given that Thielen has operated primarily out of the slot. But if it's Diggs and Bradbury, that sounds like a big win for the Vikings, right?
Oh yeah, I'll take Diggs in that matchup 99 times out of 100. I mean, Diggs is clearly the superior player, I think. And Bradbury, I mean, it's not like Bradbury's bad. It's just like I feel like he's a cornerback too, on a team, which is where he was with Josh Norman, and I think that's kind of where he belongs. I think he's more that's more where he should be on a team, and I think that Carolina personnel right now just doesn't fit what he's fit for. But you mentioned Adam Thielen in the slot. Another revenge game here. Captain Munnerlyn in the slot for Carolina.
I was just going to say that.
Again, I feel like I say this every single show, but like the size advantage that Adam Thielen has in the slot, especially over 5'8" or 5'9" or whatever Captain Munnerlyn is, another advantage there. And Captain Munnerlyn, for what it's worth, obviously when he was in Minnesota, he was exceptional there. He still is, but you're seeing the age. It's starting to show up, and I think Adam Thielen has the advantage there in that matchup as well. Really across the board here. I'll take the Minnesota receivers over the secondary of Carolina. Just that front seven is going to be, I think, the issue for Minnesota.
Yeah, absolutely. You got Darryl Worley at the other cornerback spot. And I did notice here that Ladarius Gunter is now a Carolina Panther.
Is he really?
Yeah, that's a guy that I absolutely destroyed.
Wait, so is he the cornerback that ran like a high 4.7 or something like that?
Yeah, out of Miami.
Yeah, and he just got torched like every other snap last year. Yeah.
During the NFC Championship against Atlanta, he was completely exposed. So, should be interesting. I think for what it's worth, I still think Captain Munnerlyn is a very solid player. But like you said, I do expect Adam Thielen. Like these former Vikings here, you look at Matt Khalil and you look at Captain Munnerlyn. These are guys that have a ton of talent, but matched up in a one-on-one situation against Everson Griffin and Adam Thielen, which is basically what a well-rounded roster allows you to do. It creates a ton of good quality one-on-one matchups, and in theory, if you win a ton of one-on-one matchups, you're going to win the football game, right? So you look at that right there. Just the fact that the Vikings, Adam Thielen and Everson Griffin, two of the team's best players, two of their, quote, blue-chip quality players, are matched up on a couple of guys that, looking at this on paper, do not seem to be great matchups, from the Panther perspective. So I suppose we'll see. I think it is also worth noting here that Kurt Coleman, for another former Viking, I mean, you have to wonder if the general manager out there in Carolina is just picking, because Charles Johnson got picked up there too as soon as he was, as soon as the Vikings left him. So there's a ton of former Vikings here. There's probably a ton of just like, I'm sure it's friendly competition for sure. But I'm sure that, the Vikings would love to see Matt Khalil get destroyed this weekend. I'm sure that they'd love to see Adam Thielen torch Captain Munnerlyn. And I'm sure that, the Vikings would love to shut people up saying Mike Zimmer, cut Kurt Coleman, and all of a sudden that he turned into a great player. And for what it's worth, I'm one of the people that has been harping on that. Like I thought Kurt Coleman was fairly impressive when he was in camp with the Vikings, and he gets cut, and now he's been, a turnover machine for Carolina. So in my opinion, him and Munnerlyn are the two guys that I would be concerned about in the secondary, just because Munnerlyn is so dangerous off the edge specifically, a very good pass rusher from that nickel cornerback spot. And then Kurt Coleman is just a ball hawk. He does a lot of, big things. So Case Keenum will have to be smart with the football once again this week, because the secondary is certainly capable of forcing, opposing teams to, turn over the football and things of that nature.
Yeah, I kind of, this has happened the past few weeks with Minnesota, but this offense, it appears to kind of not get off to a blazing start, and I think a lot of that is just because Pat Shurmur's trying to set the tone for the game. He's trying to figure out what works early, and then from there he, for example, if Latavius Murray gets going early, sets up the play action. If Jerick McKinnon can get off on a couple screens, that opens things up. I mean, I think he's just kind of feels out where Carolina is working on defense, and then he kind of exploits where they're not working. And so I think that's what's going to happen, I think, this week. You saw that last week with Atlanta. The running game wasn't working, and obviously the Atlanta took away the top two receivers quite a bit. So after some adjustments were made, Keenum started looking for his second and third options. Things started to open up, and I think you'll see something similar where he'll look for what Carolina is really trying to take away, and then he'll scheme away from that and take advantage. So, I kind of half expect a semi-slow start for the offense of Minnesota, and then they'll kind of pick it up after that because it seems like Pat Shurmur's adjustments all season have been superb.
Absolutely. All right, so from there, let's jump into our picks for the week. We'll kind of talk about each game here a little bit. Little bit different than what we've been doing in the past year. We did add our sports grunt Kyle, his picks to the show. So starting off with this New Orleans-Atlanta game, we obviously know that Atlanta got the W here on a late drive. Matt Ryan comes back during the second half. I had Atlanta, Kyle had Atlanta, and Drew, which team did you have?
Can we talk about last week? Because last week, your boy went 15-1, and I believe that's a 6-game increase in our lead in the lead. Yep. So I am now 126-66 on the year. A solid 8-game lead. Well, not the 7-game lead after the Saints game, but point is, I was elite last week.
So what team did you pick in the New Orleans Atlanta game?
I picked the Saints.
Okay. All right. On to the next one here. We got an Indianapolis at Buffalo here. Andrew Luck, Tyrod Taylor. Interesting matchup here. Buffalo's kind of.
I wish.
yeah. That would be an interesting matchup, I should say.
It would.
But this Buffalo team is kind of falling apart a little bit here, or maybe a lot of it. But they're still capable here. Who you got in this football game?
I mean, it's like least the interesting matchup of the week. I'll take the Bills just because they seem less bad.
Yeah, I'm going with Buffalo as well here. On to Chicago at Cincinnati now. Bears have kind of fallen apart in recent weeks here, getting blown out by the Ravens. It seems like John Fox's days there are certainly numbered. And then Cincinnati, speaking of days that are definitely numbered, I mean, Marvin Lewis, I'm sorry.
It's like 4 or 5 years now his days have been numbered.
Yeah, I mean, I respect the man, but it's time for him to go for sure. So Chicago at Cincinnati, this is a matchup of two, in my opinion, fairly dysfunctional teams. Who you got?
I got Cincinnati because John Fox needs to be gone. I mostly am just picking the Bengals because I want John Fox gone. Like, I need the Firefox hashtag and the movement. It needs to be done. Those people need to be satisfied. Give me the Bengals.
Absolutely. I'm taking Chicago here simply because, I do think that they have talent on their roster. It's just a matter of if Dowell Loggins and John Fox can actually bring it out. Something that I have my doubts on, but we have seen, Tariq Cohen get off at different points this year. We've seen, my point being here essentially is that Chicago is on the up and up, and there's a possibility that they come in with the right game plan this week and get a W. And against a Cincinnati team that set a franchise record for most penalty yards.
Oh yeah,
last Thursday.
Good coaching. That's why Marvin Lewis is still employed.
Exactly.
Good coaching.
So I'm going to take Chicago here. Next one here, Green Bay at Cleveland. This was a really fun one for me to pick.
Yeah, really?
Yeah,
because you picked Cleveland.
I did pick Cleveland. Who do you got in this game?
I'm picking the Packers because the Browns are the worst team in the NFL.
Are they? Are they though?
Yeah, they are.
I mean, could Green Bay, in theory?
No, they're not.
They're not.
They're not the worst team without Aaron Rodgers.
But
they're close though.
But Cleveland probably has more pieces when Aaron Rodgers isn't on the field. Cleveland has a dominant defensive line. They can stop the run, and basically that's what Green Bay has been able to do well as of late with Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones.
Look. They have to win one out of 12, 13 games before I'm convinced. So I feel like I'm picking safe here. I'm picking Green Bay because they've won with Brett Hundley, and they almost beat the Steelers last week with Brett Hundley. Or 2 weeks ago. So give me the Packers because I feel like that's a safer pick here.
I'm going to stick with my Cleveland pick despite Drew's theory here that Green Bay actually.
For what it's worth, the result of tonight's game was a big knock on Green Bay's playoff chances.
Yeah.
Atlanta getting up in that wild card spot, which I mentioned last show. With Aaron Rodgers coming back, with Cleveland this week, they had a real chance to make some noise in the playoff race. But I think Atlanta getting that W tonight may have sealed the deal there as far as Green Bay's playoff chances go.
Yeah, we might look back and when we go to kind of analyze where it fell apart completely for Green Bay, we might look at this game, the fact that they weren't able to control their own destiny at this point, and Atlanta basically takes a step forward. Also, obviously hurting the Saints, which is big for the Vikings as well if they're trying to get that first round bye. I really do think that Cleveland might be the better team here. So I'm gonna stick with
Wow.
Cleveland. Period.
Okay.
So Oakland at Kansas City. That's what's up next here on the docket. Derek Carr, Alex Smith has came back down to earth. It might be time to see Pat Mahomes pretty soon here. I think that these are two very talented rosters that really aren't living up to their potential this season.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll take the Chiefs just because they're at home and because, they feel like the Vikings of last year, obviously, where, they lose a bunch of games, but then they get that one home win. And I think last year, for example, the Vikings winning against Arizona at home, kind of like, oh, okay, they might still do this, but I'll take the Chiefs here for that reason, which isn't really any good reason at all. It's just a reason, I guess.
Absolutely. Okay, so on to the next one here. I'm taking.
You picked the Raiders.
Yeah, I picked Oakland in that one. Yeah. On to the next one here. We got Dallas at the New York Giants. These again, it feels like this week is kind of just a bunch of matchups of teams that probably should have been better than they are. New York, plenty of talent on defense. Eli Manning is going to be back in there now. Shocker.
Yeah.
And, this is a fun matchup because it's a divisional matchup. It should be very competitive, but these are two teams that basically haven't lived up to anything. What's interesting to me here is that I think that Steve Spagnuolo has the opportunity to become a head coach right now, and that, for me, is the difference here. So I'm taking the Giants. Who are you going with?
Yeah, see, I had the Cowboys written down, but then I thought about that, that extra boost of energy that comes with firing a coach, and then like the players are kind of suddenly revamped, and there's an extra, emotional charge. So that's why I'm taking the Giants at home to beat the Cowboys, is because it seems like a lot of teams just have an extra energy after a coach gets fired, and they kind of play. They really play inspired for the new guy, and I think that's what happens this week.
So Drew and I were on the same page for this one, and then Sports Grunt Kyle went with Dallas. So we'll see how that one plays out. Next one here. This one was unanimous. Detroit at Tampa Bay. Who we got here?
I have Detroit. I do think Tampa could make this interesting, given Jameis Winston's now back. But I have to go with Detroit, and they're gonna at least. They'll keep themselves alive in the playoff race as well, but I think their time is running low.
Yeah, I'm with you here. Detroit is the easy pick for me here. Tampa Bay is playing at home, so I understand people that are taking the Bucs in this game, but Detroit is a very talented team that. The difference between last year and this year, in my opinion, for Detroit is basically they're not winning down the stretch quite like they did last year. Remember 2-minute Stafford last year when they'd make all these comeback runs? Well, they're not quite getting there week in and week out this year, and that's kind of the difference. But I still think this is a very talented, loaded roster, a very competitive Lions team. So I'm taking Detroit here for the fact that, again, this is a battle of two teams that have largely underachieved here. And I think that Detroit at this point in the season is a little bit hungrier than Tampa Bay. So that's why I'm going with the Lions. Now we got our matchup here. Minnesota at Carolina. We discussed, all the different pieces of what's going to go into this matchup. What's the result going to be?
Yeah, I think the Vikings are going to win this game, and I think it'll be relatively easy, especially compared to Atlanta. Like I said, I think the Vikings have, their adjustments throughout the game on offense are usually superb from Pat Shurmur. I think that's what happens in this game. And I think defensively, the Vikings continue to be, when they do bend, they definitely don't break. I saw that against Atlanta. So I'm going to say Vikings 24, Panthers 12. And I think the Vikings, A, clinch the NFC North, B, we'll find out later in this segment here, but also gain another ground on that one seed.
Absolutely. I'm taking Minnesota as well here. I do think that this is one of probably the toughest matchup left for the Vikings this season. Obviously, it's a week-by-week league. I understand that. But, you look at how this one sets up on paper. They're going on the road. Carolina has some very solid pieces, a lot of different pieces that if they all work together well can be a very dominant team. I mean, we saw last year how that game started off in Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And basically
that was ugly.
Yeah,
ugly start to that game.
It was very ugly. Basically up to that Danielle Hunter safety, they were hurting a little bit. The Vikings, it didn't look like the Vikings were going to pull out a W in that game, but then Marcus Sherrills does his thing, Danielle Hunter does his thing, and it's a whole different ballgame. So for me, this is probably going to come down to, once again, a big momentum shift because these are two very talented rosters. I just simply think the Vikings are hot right now, and that's probably a good reason to favor them as the likelier candidate here to get the one big play that they need in a matchup of, again, fairly evenly matched teams. So all three of us here going with Minnesota. On to the next one here. We got San Francisco at Houston. No Deshaun Watson. Jimmy Garoppolo now in San Francisco. Kind of makes Kyle Shanahan's team a little bit more intriguing. They still have obviously a long ways to go. A lot of pieces still to that they'll need to build. But Houston also has a lot of pieces as well, with tons of injuries, obviously, but they do have a lot of pieces. So this is a game for me that could kind of go either way. Fairly evenly matched in terms of what their roster composition looks like right now. Who you got in this football game?
I'm taking Houston. Not really sure why, because neither of these teams, I don't care about either one quite a bit. So I'll take the Texans because they're at home. That's kind of my rule of thumb, is if I don't really care or don't know a lot about the matchup, I pick the home team. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I am also going to go with Houston on this play. I think that they're probably more equipped to win right now, simply because, like I said, San Francisco has a ways to go here. Very talented team, very talented coaching staff, but they're going to need a lot more pieces. Basically in their secondary, their linebackers are solid, but they could use some more pieces there. The defensive line is very strong, but as a whole, I just think that Houston with Bill O'Brien is probably the team that's more equipped to win here. So I'm going to go with the home team, the Houston Texans. On to the next one here. We've got New York Jets at Denver Broncos. Matchup of two teams that, if they only had a quarterback, you just have to wonder what they might be like.
Yeah, Yeah, I'll take the Broncos, and I feel like they're still the more talented team here. I guess I'm banking on a good game from who is their quarterback now? Like, is it Brock Osweiler still, or is it Paxton Lynch, or
See, that's kind of the point here. The fact that you have to wonder which one of those three is going to start. The revolving door at the cornerback position.
Maybe John Elway suits up. Who knows?
Yeah,
I think he's still in the organization. I think he could sign himself to a deal.
Is that out of the realm of possibilities? I don't know. I'm
probably better than Trevor Siemian right now.
Very easily could be, given what we've seen from Siemian of late.
I'm picking the Broncos. John Elway for MVP.
I'm taking the New York Jets on this one. I like Todd Bowles as a coach. That's literally my only reasoning for this win. Tennessee at Arizona's up next here. Bruce Arians, extremely talented, knows what he's doing. Tennessee, fun team, a team that's on the up and up. Could be very dangerous sooner rather than later. Who are you going with here?
I have the Cardinals. It's another one of those where I don't care a whole lot, and so I'm picking the home team.
I initially was going to take Arizona here, but instead I'm going to make a last-second switch here and go with Tennessee. I just think that Tennessee is a very talented
because you
team.
need to gain some ground. That's why you picked Tennessee.
Maybe that's why I did it. Anyways, on to the next game here. We got the Redskins at the Los Angeles Chargers here. It's interesting the way that, looking at our picks, this is interesting how this one lined up, because I do think that these are two good teams, but for me, the reason why I went the way I did was because one of them is hot right now and one of them is falling apart quickly.
That's exactly why I picked the Chargers here too. And that obviously that home field advantage they have at StubHub Center or whatever, that 25,000 people roaring in this game. No, I got the Chargers just because they're hot, and Redskins really aren't. I mean, they just got drilled by the Cowboys last week. So
absolutely. Next one here. I also went with the Chargers, by the way. I thought that was fairly clear. On the next one, we got Philadelphia at the Los Angeles Rams.
Good game.
Very good game. This is matchup of the week, right? Maybe it's either
my matchup of the week.
It's either this one or the next one. I think this game is probably a little bit more fun. Another lopsided picks for us. I went with the Los Angeles Rams, kind of just because I want them to win more. I think these are two very good teams, but I like the Rams just a little bit more. If Jared Goff plays well, there are so many good pieces around him that they can be a dominant football team for just like the Vikings. Basically, if they get good quarterback play, they've got a strong defense. They got a ton of weapons. Philadelphia coming off of, a loss that I think that most people weren't really expecting them to take, or a lot of people at least. Who you got in this football game?
Well, see, I'm picking this game more because of the Eagles and that, their one win this year against a winning team is against Carolina, who I said previously that, I think there's some holes on Carolina as well. So I haven't seen enough from them that tells me that they can go on the road to, what has been an NFC power on the road against the Rams here and win. So I'm picking the Rams at home in front of their home crowd. And I just think, I think the Rams are too much for this Eagles team that, again, needs to prove more before I can believe in them to beat one of the top teams in the NFL on the road.
Absolutely. So, like I said, I'm going with the Rams as well in this matchup. Should be a really fun one to watch and maybe even watch again.
Yep.
On to the next one here, Seattle at Jacksonville. So, like I just said, if you don't think Philly at Los Angeles is game of the week, it's probably this one right here. Seahawks against Saxonville. Should be a defense first matchup here. Should be a lot of fun to watch. Who are you going with here? And I think the reasoning for me is going to make a whole lot of sense here.
Oh, really? You think that about your own reasoning?
Yeah, I do think that.
How about this reasoning? Blake Bortles against the Seahawks.
Okay. How about Jacksonville's defensive line against Seattle's offensive line?
Fair. See, how about this for a final score? Seahawks 4, Jags 2. Because that's what I'm going with.
I'll take Jacksonville then. I'll take the reverse. Jacksonville 4, Seahawks 2. Baltimore at Pittsburgh. I gotta say, these last, the end of the week matchups are pretty solid here because Baltimore at Pittsburgh should be a pretty filthy game. Those are two teams that do not like each other, obviously. It should be a fun one for sure. Who you got?
I got Pittsburgh. I don't believe in the Ravens, even though are they 7-5 now? I think they might be 7-5, or they're 7-5, I think, which is weird because they're not actually good. Steelers at home, I have to pick them.
Yeah, I'm taking the Steelers as well. I went with them as my Super Bowl pick at the beginning of the year. I'm going to stick with that because I think that Pittsburgh is playing well, and they're, in my opinion, other than New England, they're the most competitive team in the AFC. And this is the type of game where they're going to come out hard. They're not they're not going to allow anything to happen this week that would essentially allow them to lose this rivalry matchup. So I'm taking I'm taking Pittsburgh here, and I think I don't even think it's gonna be close. I think the Steelers are gonna blow them out. So next one here, we got the New England Patriots at the Miami Dolphins. Do we even need to give our picks?
No, we did. Yeah, Patriots.
Yeah,
pretty clear.
Patriots for the both of us. So that rounds out our picks for the week. We got a couple minutes left here, so let's knock out a Twitter question or two. What do we got?
Yeah, we had one from. Let me find is it J Mills? I'm trying to get the @ here, make sure that's right. At JM Mills 94, he's asking us, is it worth having a cornerback shadow Christian McCaffrey on Sunday? Very interesting question because I almost think it's worth it. But what's your take?
So I think so too because I think he's the number one receiver on this team. I know he's a running back, but I think that he is the number one target. I guess that might make a little bit more sense. But the question here then, so we both agree, right, that it potentially is worth it to put a cornerback on him, right?
And who, right?
Right, that was going to be my question. So is this Mac, Trey Waynes, or Xavier Rhodes? I think there's an argument for all three, to be honest with you.
I think I'm going Mackenzie Alexander because I think, I think the size, there's not much of a size difference. I think they mirror each other in terms of the twitch, quickness, off the line of scrimmage. And I think McCaffrey's, primarily if he's lined up at receiver, he'll be in the slot, or if he's out of the backfield, he'll be running slot concept routes.
Right.
So I think Mackenzie Alexander is probably the best match for McCaffrey, and then you have Rhodes against Funchess, and then Waynes against whatever human is also out there for Panthers. So, I think that I'd put Mackenzie Alexander on him. Oops, I dropped my pen. In passing situations, I'm going to go with Mac.
Yeah, I'm with you. Straight up across the board there. I think that Rhodes is going to lock down Funchess. follow him all over the field, basically eliminate him from the game. Then I think you'll see Mackenzie Alexander, especially because this is what it makes sense the most to me, is that McCaffrey lines up in the slot a ton, right? That's where Mackenzie Alexander has done his finest work this year. For the most part, he's been the nickel cornerback. I mean, we've seen him line up on the outside, I believe, a couple times, but for the most part, he's a nickel corner. So I think that's, based off what we have seen in the past, I think that Mackenzie Alexander makes the most sense here to match up on Christian McCaffrey, and I absolutely think it's worth it because he's probably their most dynamic weapon with exception to their quarterback. So, yeah, it's definitely worth it to put a cornerback on him. It's just a matter of which one. And, the way that we just broke that down, I just thought about this. This might be the Trey Waynes breakout game. The game where everyone finally is like, okay, fine.
I hope so.
Fine. I wanted Marcus Peters. We got Trey Waynes. And Marcus Peters walks off the field last week. Waynes continues chugging along without,
But what will it take for a good game against Kalen Clay?
I mean, again, it's failures inherent to the position. So he's probably going to lose one or two matchups when he's targeted. Just if he gets targeted 4 times, once or twice, how about 30 yards or less allowed for Trey Waynes this week? Bold. Is that bold? That's probably not bold. There's a prediction for you. I think Trey Waynes is going to have a breakout game this weekend against Carolina. I think
he did have an interception last time at Carolina.
Right. He seems to really be picking it up. And again, if you're Trey Waynes and you see that Marcus Peters just walked off the field, left his team basically as Kansas City is unraveling, and then you also are on Twitter all the time and you see all this hate that people love to throw at Waynes, whether it's, maybe they don't understand the position itself or maybe they're just pissed off at everything. However that works, Trey Waynes is probably going to be pretty motivated at this point. And I think this is definitely a good game to see his best stuff. So from the Vikings defense perspective, we know what's going to happen with Rhodes at this point. I think that watching Waynes this weekend might be intriguing because I really do think this has breakout game written all over it.
For what it's worth here, another one of our tweets actually from our sports grunt, Kyle. He says here he predicts Mackenzie Alexander gets 2 interceptions this week. So, I mean, he'll probably be seeing a lot of targets if the Vikings match him up the way that we would like it to work out. But and then our last one here from Adam West at a West E1. He says he's got nothing as far as a take or a question, but he says everything is a reasonable or snake-bitten history type of scenario. So what are you worried about a snake bite happening for the Vikings down the stretch here? Are you just, what is your mindset as far as that goes? Because I think a lot of people are talking about it.
Not right now. I'm not. Again, I hate to regurgitate content, but I can't find a weakness right now. Again, I know the
Vikings made both of their PATs last week, so there's your weakness.
See, I know that the Vikings are capable of imploding just like any other team, but again, I'm going to use this statement one more time. How? What's going to happen? Where do you see, even in theory, even if one of their most dominant players on defense gets hurt, let's say Harrison Smith, Anthony Barr, something like that, they can still probably recover from just about any significant injury because they do have depth across the board. So right now, I think Vikings fans are running out of hot takes. There's not a whole lot left there.
Adam even said then that I just have nothing left for a hot take. There's nothing left. I want to say one thing though, it seems like I'm still seeing that idea of, Case Keenum is eventually going to go back to his old self, or he's going to break down, and this is all going to wilt away. Man, the more I watch him, the more I think this is who Case Keenum is. And again, I say this, I feel like every show, but in Houston and St. Louis and Los Angeles and wherever he was not set up to succeed like he is right now in Minnesota. And this is the Case Keenum that he's always been. And it's just that when you get an offensive line that can protect, a running game that runs the ball, top 10 in the league, and I'm feeling Stephon Diggs on the outside, you're set up to do well, and you're going to do well when you have his talent. So stop worrying about Case Keenum. It's not going to be him that falls apart at the end. I really don't think it's going to be him because he's been rock solid all year, but specifically the last 5 weeks. So
absolutely. I'm with you here. Completely across the board. Until the Vikings show me a weakness, I'm not gonna harp on one because I just don't see a weakness right now. So that about wraps up the show for the pregame primer here. We appreciate everyone as always listening, and we appreciate you guys joining. The new channels here. Obviously, we made the shift over from Vikings territory to zone coverage, and then also on the About the Labor YouTube page. So we appreciate it. Thanks you guys for finding us here. Thanks for listening to the show. Thanks for continuing to do your thing. We really appreciate all that. We're having a blast. So iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. You can find us on YouTube. Again, like I said, on zone coverage and on on the About the Labor YouTube page as well. And yeah, so we'll catch you guys for a rapid reaction. Again, Drew and I both going with a Vikings victory here. We'll see you guys on Monday.